A big pile of comments. Yeah. Yes, draft physics presentation and such. So, haven't read them yet, and I'll probably read them poorly, but it's, they went to the trouble, so let's see if there's an argument in here somewhere. Now, let's just understand my argument. My argument is the evidence for all of these extraordinary claims, and they are kind of extraordinary, okay, that mass somehow bends space and time. Not only does it somehow pull stuff in, like it subtracts space, and somehow the thing sitting in the space knows space just disappeared. Like somehow space is ether or something. But they're afraid to say that word, right? They're afraid to say they believe in an ether or some sort of connected stuff where, like water, you could pull some out and you'll notice that there's something missing. Now with space, it's a little trickier to say, I just removed some space and you're supposed to notice that some space is missing. Well, if it's nothing, there's like an endless supply of nothing. So why wouldn't the endless supply of nothing just fill in the empty nothing void? Why would it bother me any if somebody removes nothing next to me? Now, we know there's an atmosphere next to me, so if it got removed, there would be a void, an empty space, a vacuum would be left. But if I'm in space and you pull some vacuum away, how am I going to notice the absence of the vacuum? I mean, it's a mechanically difficult, at minimum. Okay, you can't just say, oh yeah, it's mechanically simple. No, it's mechanically impossible to even comprehend in a way. Kind of extraordinary claim. And yet you have below ordinary evidence defending it. I mean, minuscule amounts of evidence, little fringe experiments way out there. Allen aspect. Another experiment never repeated. All these experiments never repeated. And that are incredibly complex and full of assumptions. I point out something simple. Why are we calling beam splitters these complex objects, two prisms glued together, when you can split light perfectly in half by just using a plain piece of glass and 45-degree angle? Why is that beam splitter unknown in physics and yet use a term like beam splitter when really it's a beam something elser? And then you don't even have the guts to explain why all your drawings of interferometers they don't show the light going through the different layers of your beam splitter. So many things. And I'm just asking for you to make a concession that your theory is completely vulnerable, all right, to some other mechanical mechanism, because you really haven't proven anything. And you haven't. I mean, you haven't provided evidence is what proof is made out of. And your evidence is incredibly thin. Alright. And they won't concede that simple point. So let's understand. That's what the argument's about. Their inability to concede a simple point. That their fundamental assumptions still haven't been turned into anything more than assumptions. They haven't demonstrated them to be irrefutable facts. Not even close to irrefutable facts. All right. So this is a post that I don't know, somehow editing made it into the spam folder. I don't know how it got in there, but anyway, I didn't put it in there. But anyway, it's really sad that people have to keep subjecting themselves to someone who just never ever tries to understand what the others are saying. So again, somebody makes the aggressive assertion that here, what other possible explanation can there be for atomic clocks having their radioactive decay changed than relativity? And I point out how, no, you can make lots of explanations for why those two things don't have to have anything to do with each other. And that's being dishonest. And instead just spouts whatever brain fart pops into his skull. So again, just more useless rhetoric. And I'll say the same thing about you people, okay? That's all you're interested in, is useless gibberish. You don't have a fucking argument. You can't deal with a single point I raise about the weaknesses of your evidence. All right, the fact that you don't even analyze your beam splitters. You don't analyze how photographic polarizing film actually works, and that it may not be 50-50. You don't even analyze any of this stuff, and yet you declare the truth that you've observed through it. You accept no responsibility. Like I said, I mean, Eddington's experiment was terrible. Not just because it was, in theory, unrealistic. I mean, they didn't even use a telescope directly looking at the sun. I mean, it was on its side, and they used a mirror to reflect the light into it. I mean, and you won't accept any criticism. You say it's all pristine and perfect, when it clearly isn't. So you're preposterous in your fucking propagandizing. You have no evidence almost, and you're arguing for your, we finished our job, we've completed our task, we have to do nothing else to prove our God theory. And it still remains, in my opinion, nothing better than a God theory. You don't comprehend anything of what I was trying to say in my comment. I read the fucking thing, cunt. Yes, I don't comprehend it as a valid argument defending any notion that I have any rational obligation to see your evidence as insurmountable and sufficient, because I don't see it as anywhere close to it. And it's plainly evidence to anyone. Right, I'd say the same thing. If there were any honest men watching these videos, yes, it should be apparent to them that these people are not interested in the truth. They're interested in selling their religious theory. Anyone with a sliver or grasp of these concepts that you don't. So, whatever that is. Right. You're the people who thought interferometers had something to do with plainly just splitting light, when clearly that's not what they're doing. Beam splitters don't just split light into two beams. If that's what they were doing, they would just use a plain piece of glass. But that's not what they're doing. The agenda is different. No matter what you say, there's one chess piece you can't move. It's that our measurements of space and time are fundamentally dependent on velocity. This idea of measuring, okay, you call every interaction in the universe a measurement, and you think that these measurements, whatever you call them, so you're just take your statement on its face, okay, that it's our measurements of space and time are fundamentally dependent on velocity, when your very own theory essentially says, and I would agree with that part of the theory, that in a relative circumstance there is no dependency on velocity. Velocity is now irrelevant to the measurement. So, who's being sincere in arguing something? we know that if two people are traveling on a bus and they've been traveling on the bus for, say, 25 minutes, they have the same speed. Their velocities are the same. And any experiments they do, any measurements they do, their velocity is not going to be relevant to the measurement. Any relative difference in their velocities, because there won't be any relative differences. Okay, the only thing that will dispute this is experimentation. I argue that certainly you don't have to do the experiment to know theoretically what you're demanding. And I could even point out that in the interferometer again, I could just point out, well, clearly it's not about just splitting the light into two beams. It's about doing something else to the light. Because again, why wouldn't you use the simple method to split the light? Why use the complex one? Because the complex one is doing something complex. Alright. Now, if every possible clock, every possible atomic process is slowed down, How the fuck is it that not a slowing down of time? Now, if every possible clock, every possible atomic process is slowed down, how the fuck is that not a slowing down of time? The point is whether time has a zero and time has a maximum. The relativists argue that they can eliminate zero and the maximum by jumping into frames. So you could essentially put a frame inside a frame inside a frame, and by your theory, light could travel 10 times the speed of light. And you wouldn't be able to understand that because of this framing bullshit. You wouldn't see the truth. I'm arguing that there is an absolute zero and there is an absolute the speed of light. Light, photons, always travel the same number of units of space in the same amount of time. They can't, no matter how many frames you put them in, they can't ever eat more space than a certain amount of space for a certain amount of time. And that's it. There is no other universe. There's one frame, and that's it. So those are clear distinctions between what we perceive the world to how the world functions. You think the photons are moving relative to other things moving, and I think photons are moving relative to photons. Okay, they're moving relative to an absolute speed, an absolute Pac-Man ability to eat space, and that's it. There is no other physics. There's one physics, one universe. Slow down time more. More importantly, oh jeez, so the other sentence wasn't emphasized enough. We have a more important sentence. Any proposed mechanism behind this is not exclusive to the previous point. Mechanism behind it is not exclusive. Well, I would argue there's one right answer to what the mechanism is. So that's all, so that's your false dichotomy says. So there's some false dichotomy in me pointing out how these are fundamentally different perceptions of reality. You think the measuring mechanism is some sort of circle, okay? The ruler's a circle or something, and the numbers can just keep going around and around or some kind of thing like that. You have a bent ruler that you think is the real ruler, and I say, now it's straight, rigid, can't break these laws. They're the laws of the universe. Photons only travel one speed, and they only travel that one speed no matter what frames you think you have them in. Alright. Alright, any explanation behind this will inevitably be an explanation of changes in length and time. Says you. I don't think either one has anything to do with anything. You can't, in my first I'm going to argue you can't change length. Alright, a unit of space, an amount of distance is amount of distance, is amount of distance, is amount of distance, and the same is true for time. Time is just a function. It's measurable by exactly the thing we're talking about, how much space and how much time a photon eats space. But yes, it's obviously measurable by a lot of other mechanisms, how long it takes, or, well, the distance between an electron and a proton inside of an atom, or some other standard distance. There's lots of standard distances and standard amounts of time, and there is no variability based on what frame you put them in. The fact that you think otherwise shows you have no idea what you're arguing against. Well, I would say that the fact that you can't get it is because you're a religious kook. So we'll just stick to just insulting each other. Fine. Fuck you, dumbass. Or what you're arguing for. Yes, you're ignorant. I'm not. There. Fine. We've established that. I think you're an ignorant asshole. There. Did I win? Einstein's SR describes some of those relationships through the use of Minkowski geometry. Who cares? You think all that mush is important, okay? You have all this gibberish. You have 5 million, you have 176 new particles that you think are real, and they last milliseconds. and you think I'm going to give a shit about Minkowski geometry. No, I don't. I don't give a fuck. There's one geometry. There's one universe. You want to believe it's warped and bent? Go ahead. Knock yourself out. I'm saying you don't have enough evidence to tell any other rational person it's the truth. Where's your evidence? And GR describes the other relationship through a covalinear generalization of Minkowski geometry. So again, they're just going to talk about how they've chosen to establish coordinates and decide that we can use a mathematical arrangement to sit there and bend and warp geometry. So what? It has nothing to do with any obligation for a rational person to look out into space and say, oh yeah, I can see how it's all mathematically connected, and that all I have to do is change one number of my factors and I can just move everything in the universe around because I changed the measuring grid work. Fuck you. You haven't proven that anything like that happens in the universe. All right. Whatever mechanism there is as an explanation behind this, behind what, will inevitably serve as an explanation for these frameworks. Fine. Okay. Gibberish, 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 gibberish. And you say that's good evidence. I say it's nothing. Your issue is highlighted exactly at 650. Bent space is no explanation for how you can remove space for free. Yes, I'm giving you this. I'm giving you a simplification of the simple argument that you have no mechanism, and it conveniently, because you're moving something, you're removing space, you're removing something that doesn't have any mass, that you get the free cheat of saying I don't have to have any energy to move it. Obviously, I don't need energy to remove nothing. Isn't that convenient? It seems like a circular, convenient theory. Well, if we remove nothing to make something move, okay, we don't have to come up with any energy. Yeah, we don't have to push or pull. Because we're pulling nothing. How much energy can it take to pull nothing, right? I mean, that's not very heavy, nothing. Very convenient. All right. Remove space for free. If it was the ether, they'd have to explain how to take a hunk of the jello out. Yeah, I think that's just a really great simplification of the argument. So why don't you explain where the energy comes from? And will he do that, do you think? Do you think he'll accept the challenge of recognizing that, yes, it is very convenient that we're able to move whole galaxies around by removing nothing? Okay. Wow. I mean, just wow. This is the same person that thinks he knows enough to completely talk to a physicist. In reality, he couldn't even keep a conversation with David D. Hilster. Holy crap. So you've made an argument somehow. First, that something I said in the D. Hilster conversation was wrong or inappropriate, or in some way pointing out how it would be really nice if you guys had evidence. So when I pointed out to David how it would be really great if you had evidence for all these wacky theories, and maybe you should just focus on tearing down the big theory that has no evidence. You know, the big religion. Let's go after the Catholics. Let's not worry about the 15 members of the cult. So no answer to the point. So the point is made. You have mechanisms behind your understanding of physics where you don't account for the energy. You don't account for the energy of the magnetism. You don't account for the energy of gravity. And in magnetism, we call it a virtual photon. It's this magic mover. It does all of these magical things, causes all of these magical effects. You don't explain where the fuck it comes from, what moves it, where its mass came from, how it does anything. It's not even a real thing. Again, you've made the real particle into a virtual particle, used a bunch of gibberish language to hide the fact that you have no particle. You have no mechanism. You have absolutely no explanation for how the fucking thing works. And yet you're claiming you have so great a theory that I'm being an asshole because I'm not jumping aboard your stupid Catholic theory of reality. Your stupid Holy Ghost bullshit. So nothing. Nothing is an answer. Alright, so this shows outright that you're mentally lazy. So obviously, who's the lazy one? Did you answer the simple critique? No. You ran away from it again. So this shows who's a fucking coward. Okay? It's not a fucking fabric. I didn't say it was a fabric. Did I, asshole? You lunatic. So in that, did I say anywhere in that sentence anything about a fabric? I even pointed out how you can't use this lame bent space argument because it's really not bent. Okay? It's being contracted. The inverse square law requires you to do this in 3 dimensions, asshole. Alright, and so basically you have to come up with some kind of mechanism where the fucking sun is somehow pulling space in, and somehow masses floating around in empty space somehow notice the space is missing. I have to move. You have no mechanism. Nothing. Amazing. Alright. It refers to the relationship between measurements of distance and time through the Romanian curvature tensor. So again, he just uses more jargon. More fucking jargon. Alright? Nothing. Just no explanation. I put 3 numbers on a thing and then I bent them. There, that proves that's the way reality works. No, it doesn't prove anything. It's not evidence of anything. And the curvature at each point is associated with a given amount of energy. From where? So again, this idiotic idea that somehow they won't call it an ether, they won't call it a substrate, yet somehow it has energy in it, and that's what's moving the masses. The magical energy from nowhere. That's it, he says in capital letters. Okay, and I'm supposed to be convinced by that. That's supposed to be enough for a rational person to say, what the fuck you're talking about? Romanian curvature tensor. That proves something. When all we know that is a big pile of gibberish, a big pile of mathematical crapola to represent something that takes place over time. And it's called a tensor because essentially it's a string theory piece of crap, some bullshit notion that somehow there's tension in space. You've made the ether into you've made the empty space into some sort of solid elastic thing. Okay, by magical you say so, not by a single shred of evidence that reality works that way. Do you think you have a dispute that there's a relationship between time and velocity, gravitation, or not? Do you think you have a dispute that there's a relationship between time and velocity? My argument is there's absolutely no relationship between time is a function. Movement is a function. They're 2 separate functions. Alright? Time isn't distance. But yes, time, it takes time to move distance. So what do you want me to argue? Do you understand they're 2 different functions? I mean, moving is different than, let's see, what's the right word for time? Than the idea that all movement is not instantaneous. I mean, the fact that movement is not instantaneous is not a remarkable fact, is it? Yeah. Everything else is pretty semantic. So this is petty semantics. This is not semantics, asshole. It's a lot more than semantics. And are meant to further confuse and distract everyone. So this is a guy using Romanian curvature tensors as arguments. And he's going to talk about distraction and confusion. Right. Alright, you've provided with the clarification. You're provided with the clarification. What clarification? Right above this line of text. What's the clarification here? Sorry, there's no clarification here. There you go. Try to think about it carefully, please. Go fuck yourself till you're dead, you stupid weasel. This isn't in the benefit of others. Mainly, at least. It's for the benefit of yourself, to spare yourself from this self-subjected torture. Yeah, the torture is living with dishonest, weaselly pieces of religious, crazy cunt shit like you people. Okay, that's all you people are. You're fucking fanatics, insane fanatics. There's a simple argument on the table that unlike Darwin's theory, you don't have shit for evidence. Alright, all you have is your love for your mathematics and your love for your fucking goddamn theory. But you have nothing in the fucking evidence bucket. Your evidence bucket sucks. and you just won't admit it because you're fanatic religious kooks. Okay. Where you just keep wondering, why is everyone so fucking retarded? Why you keep comparing GR to Jello. Yes, I have to compare it to something. What am I supposed to compare it to? It's supposed to be a force that can fucking do something. You make up your magical god, and I'm not supposed to try to imagine him. Right? I'm supposed to just accept that, no, you can't imagine him. He just magically makes space disappear, and he makes this do. And you're just giving me this list of your magical powers for your magical fucking entities that you won't even describe as an entity. It's not ether, it's not nothing, it's not something. It's some kind of other word that will just make up for it. I mean, fuck you. Anyway. Where was I? Where you just keep wondering, why is everyone so fucking retarded while you keep comparing GR to Jello like a psychotic lunatic. Right, again, so it is psychotic to try to imagine their physics theory. It's supposed to be physics, some sort of thing to do with physical stuff, and there's nothing physical in it. Thinking that everyone credible will take you serious. I don't give a fuck what the rest of, I don't care what the fuck the rest of you fucking assholes do. I'm going to win the day because I'm fucking right. Alright? And maybe some humans might realize that maybe we ought to just shoot the human race, because all you fucking weaselly cunt assholes, look at how you behaved. I show you why magnets work. I give you the first physical explanation for magnetism, a rational explanation that the thing is just a filter. It doesn't need to have any energy because it doesn't do the work. It just filters the stuff that's already in the environment. I give you a perfectly rational explanation. And what do you fucking idiots do? You just sit there and drool and say, there's no God in there. That's all you're doing. A lot of fucking bullshit calls today. I'll take that one later. Again, I know how you operate. You don't know shit. You're an anonymous coward. You won't put your name or face, either one of those two things, on these fucking videos. You have no honor or decency. You're a fucking no-account trolley, hide behind a rock and throw mud shit fucker. You're not interested in clarifications. Now, I'd be interested in your qualifications, fuckhead. You're interested in trashing people for the sake of emotion. That's all you did in this whole comment, you fucking cunt. You people are just such fucking hypocrites. You talk all this fucking trash, and then sit there and pretend like, oh, why are you reacting? Yeah, I'm reacting because you're fucking asking me to react. You're stuck in a positive feedback loop where you feel you're right just solely because you think you're right. Yeah, I'm comparing a completely irrational theory of reality that doesn't have any mechanisms, doesn't account for the energy, doesn't give a shit about conservation, pretends that frames somehow change facts like the speed of light and something not having velocity, like there can't possibly be anything that doesn't have a fake velocity of some kind, because everything has to be stuck in some frame. Yeah, just an idiotic description of reality compared to a nice, rational, solid one made of physical little bits. They're doing physical things. Yes, a push universe versus a silly pull universe. Right, let's see. So where you feel you're right just solely because. So again, just solely because I'm rational. I think I'm right because if I compare the two theories, one of them's founded on absolute babble, and the other one's founded on a nice mechanical mechanism. Alright, you think you're right while everything provided to you right at the doorstep. So again, he's claiming he's provided all the evidence needed, that there's a ton of evidence. Okay, so he's proven that light is bent by gravity. He's proven that photons think they're in the gravity twice as long because they're photons and they're moving the speed of light, so everything's time dilated. And even though they only spent 1 second in the gravity, They think they spent 2 seconds in it. Yeah. He thinks that's rational shit. No, I think that's just shit. Alright, anyway. No matter how carefully phrased, someone manages to fly right above your head. Yeah, whatever. How carefully phrased. So he thinks he can just say Riemannian curvature tensor. There we go. Didn't that prove it all to you? Doesn't that explain everything? What more proof do you need? I said Riemannian curvature tensor. There, we're done, right? I don't have to have anything called evidence. I can see Minkowski geometry. Minkowski geometry. There, we're done now, right? Nothing else to explain. No, a long way from evidence. Douche. Oh, there's some other pile of crap in the spam folder 5 days ago. Gary, the video I mentioned, it's probably a piece of shit, at time 19 minutes, and the experiment I did with a 1 meter long low power Tesla coil. So here we go. In the video shown, he uses a little light bulb. In my experiment I use a skinny long fluorescent tube held at 90 degrees to the coil to indicate the field strength along the Tesla coil. Well, sorry, you're not if you're using a fluorescent coil, all you're measuring is voltage. So there's no field strength. But anyway, to indicate the field strength along the Tesla coil length, and it's demonstrated in the same apparent wave pattern shown in the YouTube video that I linked. So again, this wave pattern crap. You know, voltages have frequencies. Not a big surprise sometimes. I used a Tesla coil because it's the only way I would be able to view a wavelength small enough that was strong enough to light up a fluorescent tube at the time. This coil setup has a movable primary coil which I could slide up and down in the secondary to further observe the wave. I mean, what, you really think you're going to create energy? Why did I use a coil? Because a receiving transmitting antenna will still work when it's rolled into a coil. So he thinks this somehow proves waves. I don't think so.
Energy. Is this energy static or kinetic? If static, our hopes are in vain. If kinetic, and
so he said 9 minutes.
It is for certain, then it is a mere question of time when men will succeed in attaching the machinery to the very wheelwork of nature.
Yes, this all looks really so brilliant.
Watts allows me to even power 240-volt mains power light source wirelessly from 15 to 40 watts. Here is a 240-volt 15-watt BC incandescent GLS light source with a dipole attached. For the next experiments, no antenna is necessary as the light source's filaments are long enough. Here is a 240-volt 30-watt tungsten incandescent strip light, and here another, far more antique, 40-watt strip light with a mirror reflector. These have to be placed close to the area to operate as they are not directly in tune with the transmitted electromagnetic waves.
So again, they're, to say they're transmitting electromagnetic waves, they're just voltage. So again, you want to argue that you're doing something other than creating a, one of those high voltage round things, whatever they were called. I keep forgetting the name of these, a Venn diagram. That's all you're doing. You're measuring electrical potential. But whatever. I really don't see the relevance of all this, but maybe I'll go back later and take a look at this. But it's obviously, there's so many people that are just, look, I showed you something, but I didn't tell you the real truth about what I actually did, kind of crap. So but I don't see how it proves anything relevant to anything I should give a shit about. But anyway, let's see. Versus the current photons as a replacement theory. So again, this wave propagation. Also, your idea of positive and negative photon is the only way for photons are going to replace a wave, but you still run into problems, etc. Well, I've already explained. No, I don't run into any. So, whatever. I think we've already done that comment. Alright, I guess I'll do the comment from the, I think it's the cowboy. Well, anyway, he's, you know, the professor, he stole Professor Lewin's account name and his image. And that's just identity theft. I mean, realistically, it's just rude as fuck. So, yes, I blocked them because it's, you shouldn't be doing that. You don't understand. Somebody has to explain to you how you really don't have a right to steal Professor Lewin's face, his identity, his name, the way he writes. You don't have a right to steal somebody's identity. You don't understand. You don't have that right. You're really fucking stupid. Alright. Look, the thing is, there are always follow-up questions that can be asked. However, you have an explanation for everything, anything. Well, obviously, I'm pretty confident that my simple theory can explain anything. That's right. Okay, that the evidence is what you people have turned it into. And it's just like the examples of the galaxy problem. You find there's a little weird thing about something, some measurement you get, and instead of looking a little deeper and see why you might be able to find an explanation for it, you invent things like dark matter. You just find excuses to invent extraordinary explanations, and you just say, fuck ordinary explanations. That seems clearly your pattern. For instance, GR says that we can treat space and time as if it is a four-dimensional vector space. And again, exactly. You think time is a dimension. It's not. You think time, you can change it. It can't. You can't. So you want to believe that crap? Go ahead and believe it. But it's complete bullshit. You had no reason to drag time into this mess beyond the fact that our imagination can imagine cheating time. But that's the only excuse you have for playing with this. And it gives the transformations for going from one frame to another. So again, who cares? The fact that you have been able to contrive over the last 100 years mathematics to justify your imagination doesn't mean it has anything to do with reality. And the fact that almost nobody can do the mathematics is sort of evidence. And the fact that I've never seen these equations ever done with real numbers in my life. I've never seen anyone ever, okay, even do the mathematics with real numbers for Mercury's precession. Where does somebody actually put real numbers into the equation and actually do the equations instead of just deriving equations? I mean, why don't you take the equations and just plug the numbers in? Oh, right, because it's not going to work. That's why. Okay. And it gives the transformations from going from one frame to another. You can ask, well, does that mean then that space itself is bending? It doesn't matter, he says. So again, it just doesn't have anything to do with physics. It just has to do with some metaphorical vector space, some virtual space they can create, and they say we're living in their virtual space. And I'm not living in your virtual space. I'm living in a physical universe, and that's why they called it physics. Alright. That's a follow-up question that may never be answered. I don't know, there was a question there? Let's see. Well, does it mean then that space itself is bending? Well, it's already pointed out it can't mean that, because in 3 dimensions it has nothing to do with bending anything. So clearly it has to do with it contracting, and that's what Susskind will say. It's a fluid, okay? Is how the math is done as a fluid dynamic question. And so it's just about a fluid and stuff moving in the fluid. That's how the math is actually done. There may not be an answer that is knowable. I'm just saying, I wouldn't even have asked the retarded question. But step 1 is getting the productive model. So predictive. So again, it's all about these phony predictions. So the novel The Time Machine was written before Einstein. Lots of people talking about time and blah blah blah. So it wasn't like Einstein didn't have any idea that maybe he can fuck with time and play this little game. So this idea that somebody did any real predicting of anything, and again, where have the predictions been proven right? Again, you still haven't proven that photons are bent by gravity. You don't have anything called proof. You don't even have anything called good evidence. You have crap as evidence. Again, perfect conditions, 2017 technology, and nobody repeats the experiment. Just like if you plot the trajectory of a ball being thrown, it follows a parabola. So again, he's comparing physical material things that have multiple velocities and comparing those, and are being affected by multiple gravity, two forces, and comparing that to photons. You could ask a follow-up question. So does the so does that mean that the ball is doing math and figuring out where to go? Well, clearly, like I said, it doesn't have to. The forces are acting. So take away the force and there's no parabola. So again, this is just a complete dodge. Where is your two forces? Alright, so again, you haven't explained your two forces. Your magical thing that you don't even call a force, your gravity thingy. Okay, you could ask a follow-up question. So does that mean that the ball is doing math and figuring out where to go? But getting the parabola is step one. So again, you think it's step one to compare photons to baseballs. And you think it's step one because you somehow have some evidence that photons of force moving the speed of light are going to be bent by a force moving the speed of light. Even though the preponderance of the evidence is no force interacts with any other force. Magnetism doesn't interact with gravity. Magnetism doesn't interact with magnetism. Light doesn't interact with magnetism. Light doesn't interact with electricity. I mean, all the evidence points to forces don't interact with forces, yet you're concluding it's a fact, a hard fact, okay, that the force moving the speed of light, called gravity, is going to affect the force moving the speed of light, called light. You have evidence, proof, you're certain. Now, that's not step one, that's failure one. So, what you call step one, that's failure one. Wrong assumption, you lose. Scientists really aren't the ones making metaphysical philosophy of science questions like that. Yeah, well, whatever they're doing, right? They're just making up crap. Many worlds, multiverses. Well, we got a problem, just make a new dimension. Just create a new universe. They don't try to solve the problem. They just use God of the Gap's answers for every single time there's a problem. God of the Gap. God of the Gap. God of the Gap answer. Not a single rational explanation. Always go for the extraordinary. The UFOs did it. It's loop-de-doo bullshit. It's worse than religious kooks. You've created so many gods. Your religions are full of your different spirits and demons and angels. You have a whole order of your magical fairy characters. It's disgusting. Okay, scientists really aren't the ones making metaphysical philosophy of science questions like that when it comes to GR or quantum mechanics for that matter. So you're just bringing up the fact that you shouldn't even say anything about quantum mechanics because the whole thing makes the GR look like nonsense, because clearly on the subatomic level we don't have magical space disappearing, we don't have all these relativity problems, so it just sounds like a big pile of crap. Obviously the two theories are not compatible. They simply state that if it looks like space is bent and we can measure how much it seemingly bends, and again, your measurements are where? By what methods? You claim, I squinted and saw it. There, I've proven it. No. Your evidence sucks. Okay. They simply state that if it looks like space is bent, so again, if it seems like, or it looks like, well, the two slits, it looks like an interference pattern. I don't have to prove it's an interference pattern. It looks like it's on and off. That's an interference pattern, right? No, it must be an interference pattern, but it's on and off pattern. That's how deep your analysis is. It sucks. And we can measure how much it seemingly bends, then we call it bent space. So again, you use words that just aren't really anything to do with reality. It's a three-dimensional function, and yet you're perfectly willing to play with two-dimensional words. Just cheat. Plainly. Of course, there are some physicists who cling to multiverse explanations, but they aren't the majority. So you're even conceding your own physicist has, some of them don't buy it. Right. That's how great it is. So you call me irrational because I'm just not licking this slop up. And your own kind won't even lick it up. Okay, and if they are, so what? I don't think that way about physics. I don't know, you don't think about physics. Because obviously you don't believe in physics. You believe in God of the Gapics. And how does that make your model better? Because it's simpler was the primary reason. It has so few moving parts. It's the simplest model you could possibly come up with, in my opinion, to explain complex behaviors like magnetism and electricity and gravity. And it explains them with the simplest frickin' rules you're ever going to come up with. It's checkerboard simple. It can't get any simpler. And it fits. So those are two good reasons. It's you can't make it any simpler, and it fits. Your explanation is just as ad hoc. So again, just bullshit. Mine aren't anywhere near as religious. I don't make up things. I don't have fake sources of energy. I don't call anything a virtual thing. Fuck you. I mean, no similarities whatsoever. Anyway, I think so. So what, just as ad hoc, except they don't describe the observation. So again, that's just nonsense. They do. Mock gravity perfectly describes gravity. It only has one little tiny flaw, and that was the drag issue. And as I've gone into in-depth explanations about how drag is a kind of an interesting concept when you figure out how atoms work and how the elemental bits function, and the fact that electrons don't acquire velocity. Okay, they have to be accelerated. They never have velocity. They can only be accelerated. Those are interesting truths in the context of the conversation. You're such a lying piece of scum. They don't describe the observations. They do describe the observations. They explain clearly why there's an inverse square law. How does your system, how do you generate the inverse square law? How does your machine work? All right? Mine does it with a simple thing. An even distribution of external pressure. And they have the inverse square law. No problem. Now how do you make it? Oh, that's right. You magically produce it. The nothing does something. That's right. Whenever someone points out a problem like friction, or how particle physics in the wave mechanics are incompatible, there's no incompatible. So he's just making claims. He's saying somehow he's proven or demonstrated with some experiment that particles can't explain the double slit experiment. That you can't possibly explain with a particle theory. Where I pointed out how it's just so easy. You just point out how if it hits a particle hits an electron, it has a 50-50 chance of going 4 degrees this way or 4 degrees that way. That simple rule, you have the double slit pattern. That's all you need. Nothing more. And he says it's impossible. Oh, it's incompatible. He has proof of this incompatibility. No incompatibility whatsoever. Just more lies. Oh, you can't possibly come up with a rational theory for evolution. It's not possible. It has to be a God theory. If it's not a God theory, it can't happen. It's incompatible. That's all he's saying. He's saying somehow there's a fact that's incompatible. It makes it incompatible. It's not possible for a mechanical theory of evolution to exist. You resort to some vague, none of it's vague, rhetorical explanation like the tons. So again, just more, I can't accept it, so I'll just make fun of the word. Yes, the force bits. That's right, the force bits, the particles of force. Can we? Do we have to say it that long just to make it so you can understand? The particles of force. Amazing. But the tons. Okay, so he's doing the tip-tappy thing. Okay, I'm not even going to read anymore then. Okay, that's all we need. All right, so I'll just delete it without reading it. So I'm glad you wasted your time. All right. So obviously the cowboy. So the cowboy is an identity thief. Besides his other crimes against civilization, he's also an identity theft person. Believes that's his right to steal people's identity. Piece of fucking fat, turdy piece of crap. Yeah. Alright, so we'll go back to regular comments, and I think there's the other jerk also responded with some kind of crap. Sorry, but you people just behave like jerks. So, the Russ guy, let's see. Alright, gravity is not a force. That's sort of my point. You think so. You've put it, although it moves the speed of light, just like the other forces, it's not a force. It's a magical manifestation of, whatever, Willy Wonka's Wonka machine. A force is something which makes the motion of a body deviate from uniform straight line motion. Well, that doesn't even make any sense. A body doesn't have to have motion, and the force can cause it to have motion. So there's no rule that it's doing any of that crap anyway. But clearly, that's exactly what gravity does. So he says a force is something which makes motion of a body deviate from uniform straight line motion. Quite obviously, that's exactly what gravity does. Newton pointed out that bodies have a tendency, inertia, to continue in whatever direction they are already going. Well, again, that's not true for electrons. It's not true for protons. So again, this body work. So this is the same rhetoric that Hoffler the jerk uses, that body bullshit. They're not all bodies, okay? They're different things. A photon is different than an electron, and electrons are different than atoms, and compounds are different than atoms. So just keep pretending it's all the same thing when no, they're not all the same thing. They're made of each other, okay? But clearly the fundamental physics exists on the smallest level, and that is the only physics. So you have to go all the way down to get it. Alright. A tendency to continue in whatever direction they're already going. And again, it's a tendency. The word tendency is in there. Yes, it's not a rule, apparently. Okay, with whatever velocity they have at that moment. So again, as I've already pointed out, no, there's lots of things that are only accelerated, and then there's some things that can be accelerated and multiply retain the momentum of the acceleration and add to it, and then gain velocities, independent velocities. And having an independent velocity, your physics has never explained what the difference is. So if I have two pens, one pen is flying through space at 50 miles an hour, and one pen is not. Your brilliant physics says, I don't have to explain that. It just does. It eats space just by magic. And I would argue that there's clearly a difference between this pen and the pen that's moving. The two pens have a physical difference. That's why the one's moving. It's because there's a physical difference in the pen. The space doesn't change. The space around the pen didn't change. The pen has changed when it's a velocity. Obviously, when it's an acceleration, there's a flame coming out of the bottom. It's kind of obvious. But I'm saying once the flame stops and it keeps moving, you don't explain how it keeps moving. I do. Alright, anyway. Going whatever velocity they have at the moment. Alright. that means uniform rectilinear. Oh, here we go. You know, more words we don't need. Motion, steady velocity, same direction. And again, it doesn't hold for electrons. That's why you can't make an electron gun, okay, that shoots electrons at people. Anyway, Newton then went on to say that to overcome inertia, to overcome this tendency, requires a force. That's right, because, see, what's inside the thing moving is a force. It already has a force in it. That's why it's moving. It collected force. And to stop it, you have to have opposite force. Really, really simple. When the rocket engine is shooting out the stuff going this way out of its ass, it's putting force into this thing. And that's why it keeps moving. It's because this thing has the opposite of that flame inside of it. Stupid fuck. Alright. Newton then went on to say that to overcome inertia, to overcome this tendency requires a force. Duh. That's right. You can't stop it with nothing. Bent space. Force is what makes a body depart from the geodesic. It is. So they have to use these completely unnecessary gibberish words. The geodesic, because they keep wanting to put everything into a bendable, warpable frame. You know, so we all have to use their bendable, warpable frame rhetoric instead of saying it has a position in space, in real physical space. This space right here, and this space isn't geodesicing. It isn't warping or bending or doing any of that crap. Alright, overcome its tendency requires a force. It is, even momentarily, headed on its direction and speed. So this is a proper sentence. Newton then went on to say that to overcome inertia, to overcome this tendency, requires a force. Force is what makes a body depart from the geodesic it is, even momentarily, headed on. Well, obviously everything happens at every split second. So, you know, as something's turning, each split second will be a different direction it's going to travel in, because it can't be, all the mass can't be moved instantaneously. So even that didn't make any sense. It was then Einstein, and partially Mach before him, who said this does not get to the essence of the question. Well, it says you. And clearly invisible, made-up, fucking God-of-the-gap forces aren't going to help any. For Einstein, any coordinate system had to be equally allowable. You know, what coordinate system how you decide where something is on a piece of paper. I mean, what coordinate system you use. You know, whether you use, I don't know, circles, you know, intersecting circles, or a square grid to point out that, oh yeah, this object's in, you know, in some relative position, you know, to edges, to a space from a center even. You could just say, oh, well, once we figure out the center, we can do it. Lots of ways to do it. Well, who cares? You know, you keep talking as if you think that's how the universe works. The universe really says, I have a center point, and I have all these other geodetics, and at any point I can just warp and bend them any way I want. And there's no physical thing happening. Physical things like asteroids crashing into Earth, that didn't really happen. A geodesic did something or other. I mean, it's just such a pile of shit, in my opinion. Alright. Was Einstein, essence of the question, Einstein, any coordinate system had to be equally allowable, and in fact, space-time is curved. Well, I don't care. Again, you could just keep saying it. Well, and in fact, no, I say in fantasy. And in fantasy, space-time is curved. There is no such thing as space-time anyway. It's retarded and stupid to combine the two stupid words, nothing and a function. A body or particle under the influence of gravity actually does travel in a geodesic. You just keep saying the same shit over again. I'm totally unimpressed. Says you. You have no evidence that that happens. You just had the perfect environment to duplicate the magical great Eddington experiment that put Einstein's fucking idiotic Einstein name on the map. Einstein wouldn't have been anybody without that stupid fucking idiotic experiment that proved him right. And you couldn't duplicate the fucking experiment. Perfect conditions, can't duplicate it. And you keep rubbing this shit in my face as if I have to accept your fucking babbly religion. That there's such a thing as a space-time. You don't have any evidence of any such thing as a space-time. Alright. A body or particle under the influence of gravity actually does travel the geodesic. Says you. It does what a free particle does, which doesn't even make any sense. The free particle is not spending twice as long in anything. The free particle isn't running a curved path. The free particle isn't being bent. It does what a particle not under the influence of any forces does. It just doesn't make any sense. It quite obviously doesn't do the same thing by your own fucking theory, because you say it bends it. How does it bend it by doing the same thing? It's just insane. So gravity is not a force. So again, no excuse. We just move whole planets around. We move galaxies around. We don't have to account for the energy. It just came from nowhere. The magic nowhere. Nothing place. Alright, so then this asshole posts links to my old videos. Like, oh, that proves a lot. So should I just play Einstein quotes? I mean, I could find all the Einstein quotes where Einstein was wrong. I think there's actually a video of him sitting at a table explaining how no one's ever going to make a nuclear bomb. I mean, he's actually sitting there saying, okay, you're never going to shoot a neutron into a nucleus and create a chain reaction. And then, you know, I think just 13 months later or something, the guy actually did it. So Einstein's emphatically saying how you'll never do it. And 13 months later, a guy does it. Should I play that clip over and over again? Should I just have that on my channel endlessly? Would that satisfy you as a quote miner? That's a proper argument to do? Is we'll just quote mine people? So go ahead, take quotes from my old videos. Don't take ones from the ones that I made 3 weeks ago on the subject. No, quote the ones from 7 years ago. Because you're scum. Because you can't make a fucking argument. Alright. So here's him analyzing Schrödinger equation. So that's a Brian Greene video, I don't know, 4 years ago, something like that. And if you play the whole video, I still don't see anything wrong with it. I mean, he's making up all this Copenhagen, many worlds. This is where they're talking about how all this wavy bullshit creates all these multiverses. I can't help but say, even if I was ignorant, I certainly wasn't as stupid and lame as them. So here's him analyzing inertia reference frames. Great, let's play it. But the magic frame takes care of it all. But somehow the frame knows where to create the border. See, the other asshole was arguing, what do you mean a frame? There's no frames. This is the frame. This is the frame. And once this light leaves this frame, then apparently it goes back to being normal again. Right, so here you have a perfect example, right? Inside the frame, the light's going this way. Somehow, though, when it goes outside the frame, it goes this way again. By magic. And that's just how their geodesics work. You know, you go in, and then you bend again. You know, all this bending and all this moving extra distance in the same amount of time. But no, they believe in the speed of light. So even though it goes more distance, somehow it's not moving faster. Same amount of time, longer distance, same speed. And that is good math in their opinion. So, yeah. I laugh at you. Thank you. Yes, post more links to my videos. Good idea. Alright, here's him failing at plugging shit in. So let's see what this one is.
This is a real equation? How's it real? How are these two things on this? There's an equal sign there. Now, how are these two?
Alright, so now we're back to the relativity argument where they were arguing that the photons, when in the interferometer is moving, that somehow the photons don't go straight. They go this way into the future. So the device is moving this way. The photons are supposed to be going up and down parallel, but they don't, perpendicularly. they move forward, bounce off the mirror at a future time where the mirror isn't anyway, bounce back down again, okay, and that this distance isn't somehow much, much longer, so this triangle distance isn't much longer than the up and down distance. So I could sit inside of a triangle, and the pole up and down, I could have a rat run up and down the pole, and I could have a rat run across the top of the tent. And they think, okay, that both the rats will get there at the same amount of time, and the rat that went across the top of the tent didn't have to go faster. That's their physics. So yeah, fine, you're idiots. Keep proving my point. Okay, this really isn't some misunderstanding. When people say he's lying about his understanding, they're not kidding. So I don't know what this lying about something is. I didn't lie about anything. So if you can't phrase your comments without putting some fucking accusation you can't defend in, I didn't lie about anything ever, you fucking cunt. You really don't have a right to do that. I'm not accepting it. Fuck you. Prove it or shut up. No, I'm going to shut you up. You're just not allowed to do that. I feel no right to go on Professor Lewin's videos and saying, you're not just wrong, okay? You haven't just made mistakes. You're a liar. I know I don't have any right to do that. You fucking weasel. I'd have no reason to do that either. And you have no reason to do that. You want to say I'm wrong and you explain why I'm wrong? Fine, but you don't even have the guts to do that. Again, why don't you explain why they don't call a plain piece of glass a beam splitter when it's the simplest and cleanest beam splitter you can make? Why is a beam splitter a much more complex, can't find one here, why do they always have a diffraction gradient in them? Or why are they two prisms glued together? Why do you need any of that stuff? What is that stuff for? How is that essential to making two beams when you can do it with a plain piece of glass? Why don't you explain that? If you're so fucking smart, why don't you explain why plain pieces of glass aren't called beam splitters when that's exactly what they do? Why don't you do that? Alright. Oh, this must be a 2-hour video, but too bad. Yeah. Maybe it didn't record, so maybe you'll be lucky. Till next time and such.